Is your Mercedes control unit dependent or not? So the question deserves to be asked. Which Mercedes need a control unit to run and function, and which ones don't? And so we're going to try to answer this question today so that you guys know which cars are the best cars. Now, Mercedes for a long time resisted the path of going down the control unit rabbit hole. And they made cars that were not totally dependent on a control unit to run, drive, and function. And so this tendency started to dwindle by the mid-80s and disappear completely by the mid-90s. But we're going to take a hard look at this system first and see, you know, where control units apply, not at all, partially, or fully. Let's start with the diesels. So until 1984, all Mercedes diesel engines were not control unit dependent. They had nothing that could exert influence over their injection pump metering, their throttle input, and their turbochargers. However, when the 190D 2.2 came out in '84, this car featured an overvoltage relay that controlled a system called electronic diesel system. Now, if EDS and OVP crashed, the car would still run. You could still get it in and drive it, but it would be grossly underpowered and would idle poorly, and all sorts of weird stuff would happen. And this trend continued through the 300 SDL, the 190D 2.5, the 300D 2.5. You know, the engines would all idle really low and they'd have reduced power, but they would run, and they'd keep running even if there was a battery failure. The problems began when you start getting to 1996 in the diesels, because in 96, Mercedes came out with the W210 E300 that had a fully electronic control for the injection pump and an electric injection pump shutoff and a crankshaft position sensor. Now, why on earth does a diesel need a crankshaft position sensor? I mean, this is just stupid. And the worst part is that if the crankshaft position sensor failed, the engine wouldn't run. I mean, have you guys heard of anything so ridiculous and stupid? So this is how Mercedes sabotaged their diesel engines. Now, with the gasoline engines, it's a bit more complicated. In 1969 in Europe, D-Jetronic was first featured on the 250CE and the 280SE 3.5. But this system was a mega departure from earlier Mercedes gasoline injection systems because, again, it needed a control unit to work. Now, sometime in 1975 and 76, the execs at Mercedes said, man, this is a bad idea. I don't know if we should be doing this. You know, we're having too many problems. The cars are having to be towed in. You know, they don't start easily. We need a better fuel system. So the fuel system that replaced it was K-Jetronic, which was almost completely analog until 1980. And then it had an oxygen sensor. But even if the K-Jetronic control and the KE-Jetronic control that supplanted it fail and quit working because of a bad OVP or a bad unit, or the EHA wiring harness gets cut by some idiot with a backwards facing pair of scissors while they're trying to change a spark plug, the engine will still run. And this system was used until the end of production on the 126. There's no such thing as a 126 that won't run if it has fuel delivery. It was used until 1992 on the 300E and 93 and the 300 TE 4MATIC. It was used on the 190E until the end of 93, and it was used in the 500 GE in 1994. And then it went away. And so when KE went away, that was it. It was over. The cars all went to electronic, all the gasoline cars. So the 202 C-Class, the 124, all the V8 124s are fully control unit dependent. Anything that's got a 3.2 liter M104 engine, completely electronic dependent. Now, from 90 to 92, the R129 cars with the 5 liter V8 M119 and the 3 liter inline 6 M104 were not control unit dependent. They continue to use KE Jetronic and they will still run. But the car won't shift into fifth gear if you have a 300 SL if the control unit goes down. This is still good though, even though we say these cars are on the bleeding edge, they still have continuous fuel delivery. And if the EHA goes down, they will still run. Maybe not perfectly, but they will still run and drive so that you can get where you need to go. When you start looking at the wiring harness business and then later on coded control units and tricky and expensive electronic diagnosis, guess what? You're not getting anywhere unless all the control units agree that they're going to work. And for them to all agree to work, you have to have adequate voltage, not part of the time, but all the time. The battery has to be good, the alternator has to be good, the stars have to be aligned, the code, the 48-digit code has to be accepted, and everything is good. And if there's one breach in the security system, you get nothing. And this has been the way Mercedes has been ever since. So now maybe some of you understand why I advocate for analog cars. Now some people might go, oh, but Pierre, computer technology is so good and so reliable nowadays. Is it? Is it? My iPhone has slowed down in the 6 months since I bought it new. You need a $30,000 Leonardo machine to work with a Ferrari that costs $2,500 to update every time you plug a new model in. Is it really that good? Because most of the time the reason cars die is because control units fail. Now, at least with D-Jetronic, there is one fairly basic control unit that is nothing but a giant board full of resistors and solder joints. This we can deal with. This is manageable. It's still no fun when you have a mystery issue with D-Jetronic. I remember one time I had a bad map sensor, a bad fuel pump or something, and it was 11:30 at night, and I was with Elaine, and we were driving to Lakeland for the Lake Mirror Concours, and the car just died. It just totally died, and the battery was going dead, and all my attempts to restart it, and finally I said, Jesus help me, and I pulled the map sensor hose off, and the car started. You know, because Elaine was like, well, you just replaced that part. Maybe that's your issue. And I was like, oh, maybe it is. You know, so even I've had moments where I've affirmed that resilience or lack thereof with D-Jetronic and its subcomponents. And maybe we should take a page out of Mercedes' book where they replaced it with K-Jetronic later. And I'm not saying D is bad, but I've had to spend a lot more time understanding D than I have had to K or KE or, you know, a Solex 4A1 carburetor. Now, for all of you who still have questions about this, you can watch some of my other videos about why analog cars are better. But as time goes on, you're going to be faced with two choices. Spend $40,000 to restore an analog car, or spend $40,000 every 5 years to keep buying, fixing, maintaining, leasing a modern computerized car. You tell me which slave you want to be, which one you want to be a slave of. Tell me. Because I personally do not feel like sparring with the tech giants at BMW. I'd rather deal with a carburetor or an injection system that I know and fully understand. For all of you that are ripping injection systems out and putting Megasquirt in, you're literally taking the one thing out of the car that makes it work so well. Ding dong! Anybody home? So in the meantime, please like, share, and subscribe. And please leave your comments below, even the mean ones. And if you enjoyed this video, please tap the bell for notifications and leave us a thumbs up. And also, try to appreciate your analog Mercedes. Don't run the damn thing into the ground. It's going to be your only hope in 5 to 10 years when we're all going to be forced to buy cars that are completely dependent on what the manufacturer says the car is allowed to do and isn't allowed to do. Amen.